So good afternoon, everybody. Dober dan. I'm Dober dan. Who's tired? It's been an intensive day, and I'm really glad to be here. So I have about 40 minutes of your time, and I always love to be here. It's really a beautiful country, and I've been here so many times now that I haven't even gotten used to it yet. I've been here so often. And every time I come here, it's beautiful again. I look down from the airplane. I can see from the mountains to the coast on the way in one view. And isn't that beautiful, right? And I'm glad to be here every time. Now, I do have a slight American accent, okay? And I do speak much better German than I do English. But my Slovenian isn't so good, okay? So I'm going to try to stay in an international, American, easy English style for you in that 40 minutes today. But I always want to reiterate how much I love to be here. So I have, and those of you that have seen me in Slovenia before, I always make the same statements. I have to repeat this every single time. And I have spent the night at your highest mountain peak, Triglav. And I have walked the shores of the Adriatic Sea with my bare feet. I have drunk the beautiful wine of your country and ate the wonderful food in Ljubljana. I have been at the source of the Emerald River in the cave in the mountains and have tried to touch the soul of your country. I believe in your potential, and I seriously like to repeat that every time I come visit. And I also want to say one thing, because there's so few things I can say in your language. I want to say, Ljubim vašo dizelo. Okay, so now I'm going to come a little closer. Is that okay for you? I'm going to come a little closer, walk around a little bit. It kind of gets me better into the flow. And I have brought only 3 slides with me today. And each slide has only one word, okay? And I'll try to find the topic of the day and connect that with some of the things that have impassioned me for my whole life, okay? And I'll try to bring it to a point where hopefully the energy and the passion and my deep belief for your country will come across at the end of the 40 minutes that we have, okay? And hopefully it will also reinvigorate you after such a strenuous day to have energy for the last couple of hours, okay? So I'm going to try to do all of that in one short session, okay? And the first thing for me to always do is to do a brief introduction about Patrick. And it's always difficult to do that because I'm never sure which part of my introduction is best, so I'll give you the shortest version that I can, okay? As I grew up in many different cultures. In my life, I have moved 33 times. I went to 12 different schools as I was growing up. And in my 30 years of business life, I worked in 10 different global companies in 15 different jobs. I have done almost every single job you can imagine in these different companies. I have quit my job 7 times. I have been fired 4 times. And I went insolvency, broke once, okay? And all of that has contributed to the craziness of who I am. So hopefully I can bring the positive sides of that to you today and not the negative sides of that, okay? It's also important to mention that I have also been married 3 times. And my 3rd wedding was last week, okay? So I'm very happy. I'm very happy, okay? And that's a little bit of the Patrick story. Now, I grew up in the military, so my first encounter with leadership as a small child was my father. My father, at the time, was a drill sergeant and then a command sergeant major in the United States Army. How many of you have ever personally met a drill sergeant? You have. Was it an enjoyable experience? No. Okay. Well, I had 17 years of intimate relations with a drill sergeant. And the first words my father taught me as a young child, these are my first American words I can remember, is he did not teach me, "I love you, Papa." No. He taught me, "Yes, sir. No, sir. Anything you say, sir." And it stayed that way until I turned 17 when I said, "No, sir. Screw you, sir. Goodbye, sir." Okay? So I had a little bit of allergic reaction to his leadership style. And throughout my career, I repeatedly encountered similar situations of people trying to tell me what to do. And I didn't like that a lot. Anybody here really like somebody telling you exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it, where to do it? Anybody ever get enjoyment out of that? Good, because I never did, and I thought I was the only person. I'm glad that you have joined me in that. And that had an influence on me, of course, over the course of the years. But, interesting enough, after I got out of the military, I was in the United States Navy. I decided to leave Chicago in America and immigrate to Germany. This was really important to me. I was a young person. I was still naive and believing in the goodness of the world. And I decided to leave America to go to Germany because I wanted to go from a dishwasher to a millionaire in a very few years. Interesting enough, everybody in Germany was going the other way, to America, to the land of limitless opportunity. And I tried to do it in the land of limited opportunity, which is Germany. Very limited opportunity. So I did not have the chance at the time to go to college or to university, or as my German grandmother said, I had no Ausbildung und keine Lehre and keine Universität. I had none of this. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go do it anyway. And luckily enough, about 9 years later, it took me a while. At the time, I was putting kerosene into airplanes at Frankfurt Airport. So I put, whenever you get into a Boeing aircraft or an Airbus, there's a guy that sticks it in and puts the stuff in, right? And then some that load up the baggage. That was the start of my career. And after 2 years, I was in the snow in the evening. And I was doing the same thing I'd been doing from the first day of the 2 years. And I looked over at Vanna, my supervisor. And Vanna was 55 years old at the time. He'd been doing this for 30 years. And I said, you know what? This can't be my future. I'm not really on the path to millionaire down here, right? So I had to figure something else out. And I was very lucky and very fortunate. And I'm still very thankful for that. Because just 6-7 years after that, I was lucky that my December salary of that year, I turned 29 that year. And in December, I took a salary statement home from my company that I was working for. So I'm an employee of a company. And in that month, I earned 654,000 Deutschmarks in a single month. And in that year, I earned 1.8 million Deutschmarks. And I was 29 years old. I had no education, no Ausbildung, no Lehre, keine Chance, right? In Germany. That's what they kept telling me, right? And I made the million, which was good. And then I turned 30, and the million was gone. And my first ex-wife still sends me thank you cards for that. So I learned, maybe not, I don't know, right? So it kind of happened that in that period of time of trying to do the impossible things, I started to learn things. And I worked for many different companies. I mentioned the 10 different companies I worked at. I worked at many German companies and became a leader at some point, a manager at some point in these companies. Examples of that would be Deutsche Bank and Bertelsmann, a big media company. I worked for American companies, EMC as a storage company. I worked for a company that became part of Hewlett-Packard, and I ran Dell Computer, the computer company, for almost 5 years. And I also was in a French company called Capgemini, and in a Canadian company, Air Canada, That's the kerosene thing, right? And I also spent almost 5 years running a Japanese company in Germany called Hitachi. Okay, so all these years at all these different companies, I was observing and learning and making mistakes and getting fired 4 times for making those mistakes. And I learned a lot out of the system. And 6 years ago, I had an important phase in my life, okay? I lost a lot of the things that were important to me. I lost my family. I lost my job. I lost my home. I lost almost everything that was important to me because I had been following the God of profit with everything I had, 80 hours a week for 5 years in a row. And something happened that I lost all that, and I had an encounter where I realized that something needed to change. Of course, in myself, which I did, and I found my second most important day of my life. Mark Twain once said, there's 2 most important days in your life. The first most important day in your life is the day that you're born. And the second most important day in your life is the day that you understand why. This was 6 years ago. Almost about this time of year, 6 years ago, I found my calling, the reason for why I'm here. I was a servant of the beast, which I call the mean economy, the top 500 companies in the world that own 62% of the assets of this planet and are doing everything they can to destroy it. Wantingly, willingly, with passion, with enjoyment, they're destroying everything we hold dear. And I decided that someone needs to do something about that. And I started getting friends from what we call the green economy, sustainable economy friends that have great intentions and want to do a good thing, but they're getting no traction in the real life of business and the real life of what's going on outside. And I decided my mission in life is to change the way businesses and leadership interacts with people around the whole world. I need to establish a new interaction culture, a leadership culture that focuses on people instead of numbers, focuses on values instead of value, which is money, and focuses on elements like dignity, respect, trust, and appreciation. That's my mission. And then, because I'm German American, right, I had this calling, I felt really good about it. The American side said, yes, we can, right? We're going to go do this. And then the German side said, well, you got to sit down now and make a 25-year project plan. And then I sat down and we made a 25-year project plan of how to change leadership culture in one of the most difficult countries in the world to bring goodness into, which is Germany, right? And we did that. So we're in year 5 now of the execution. I've got 20 years to go, and probably one of my biggest assets that I have in what we do is patience. I am one of the only people that I know that is not in a hurry. And the sad part of the story is my friends from the sustainable economy happen to be more of in a hurry than the people from the mean economy that I know. And they're already pretty busy. So it's all about attention and taking the time to breathe and taking the time to be aware of what's going on around you. Okay, so that's kind of the 10-minute introduction of the 3 slides that now will happen. Is that okay for you guys as a lead-in? Are you still with me? You feel okay? You're there? Okay, good. Then here we go. I get to push the button, and we do word number 1. I push the button, and we do word number 1. Okay, I push the other button and do word number 1. Okay, how about I go to the notebook and push the notebook button? That might do it. Okay, here we go. One more shot. Hey, here we go. That works. So we'll drop that. We'll turn that a little bit for you. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is reality. I go to many, many conferences, and I teach at many different universities around the world. I teach in Japan, I teach in Vietnam, in Germany, in Switzerland, soon to be teaching in Ljubljana, Thank you so much. I look forward to that. And I was asked by Stanford University potentially to start lecturing in Stanford, which is a great university in the United States. But most of my activities are in Europe and the center here. And I've learned so much about the realities, not just when I'm teaching, but more so when I was working in all these different companies. And here's the reality. Everywhere I go to conferences, everybody talks about the goodness and integrity and values and all these good things, but then everybody goes back to the office and they do it completely different than what they say, okay? So they always say something, but they rarely ever do that, okay? And there are exceptions. And I know there's a lot of great people at a lot of great companies trying to do the right thing, and they do. And they basically encapsulate their teams and do a good thing with their teams. But in many, many places, at some point, the following reality comes to bear. And as Ravi said, this is the reality everywhere in the world. Every single country, everywhere in the world. And I'm going to do it very Americanish. Okay, I'm going to be really straight with you on the reality, okay? And here's the reality. The priorities for every single company in the world that has an influence on what's going to happen on the planet are always as follows. Number one is growth. Number two is profit. And number three is shareholder value, or a return to shareholder in one form or another. No matter how much they say on their websites, no matter how much human resources, blah, blah, bullshit they put in front of you, no matter how much corporate sustainable responsibility investment they make, it all has to serve those three priorities. Now, it doesn't mean you don't be good to your people, because you can be good to people and still do that. But the reality at the end of the day is when a corporate company makes a decision to restructure in Slovenia, and they call the general manager of the company subsidiary of Microsoft in Slovenia, and she was here today, the Microsoft lady, and says, you're going to reduce 15% of your headcount by tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., what is she going to do? She's going to say, yes, sir, I'm going to be the fastest one in all the countries that do that because I want to become vice president. So I'm going to shoot 15% of my people overnight. That's the reality. Now, there's some that are brave enough and have the courage. I think it's almost like courage in Slovenian, right? Coraja. So coraja, or in España, it's cojones, right? It's very similar. It's Mario. He's my friend. We've just met each other today in the bus, but I already feel like we've got a friendship going there. So, sorry about that. So anyway, because there's a difference between the courage to say something and the courage to do something. It's a lot simpler to say something and nod your head, right? But the problem is those that are nodding their heads to the goodness of what we say today are also the first ones that nod their heads to their bosses when their bosses tell them to do something bad, okay? Why? Because when your head is used to doing this, it does it all the time. You ever seen the dogs in the old cars that in the back of the car, the dog is doing one of these? It's never doing one of these. It's always doing one of these, so it's bobbing up and down because that's what they're used to doing. They're used to saying yes. When I go to see CEOs, and I've seen 3 of the Global 500 in the last 6 months, there's a lot of questions I like to ask, and they're the same questions. My favorite question is, how many times this week has somebody said no to you? What do you think the answer is? It's always the same answer, which is interesting, right? But no one ever says. One of them is a friend of mine. It's a 25,000 employee forklift company out of Germany, and he laughs. He goes, Patrick, I've been here 8 months, ain't nobody said no yet. So it's interesting because it just, that's kind of easy to do. It's a little tougher to do that, right? So my whole life has been this. It's always been no. And Germanic culture is a very good no culture. See, Germans will always go, 9. It's like 9. 9 is the first answer. And then warum, right? And then you go, I fixed the warum. I get them all motivated. They got the why, the purpose, they're all good. And I run to the front, I look around. I got dust behind me, but no Germans. I go, wait a minute. I just spent 6 months doing the warum with you, right? And they go, well, now, they go warum. And then they go, well, und wie? Geez, now you got to tell them how to do it, right? So it's interesting. It's a culture that forces you to go much, much deeper into the purpose and much more deeper into the how, because it's not what you do, but how you do it that can make such a big difference between the same thing from one person, the same thing from in one situation and in another situation. And that always forced me as a young person. I came out of the military, I thought it was, gung-ho, American, rah-rah. I jump on the table, go, let's do, and we run, and I run, and everybody's behind me. No, it didn't happen. So for 10 years, I kept trying to figure out why this dust behind me was people running away instead of following me. So I had to learn to become a different type of leader. But interesting enough, the reality is the reality, and the nodders are the nodders. And very few people will stand up, raise their hand, open their mouth, and say no. And say it like they mean it. It's not the no. No, it's like, no, I'm going to put my life on the line for what I believe in. And that's exactly what doesn't happen. And as long as it doesn't happen, we can have all the greatest intentions of the world. We could have all 1 billion Indians saying harmony and goodness and loveness and all that good stuff is what we want. But the 342 people in charge are going to say, we don't care. They do that today. They don't say it publicly. But when they're sitting down, drinking their brandy and smoking those cigars from socialist friends of Cuba, right? And they get a good stock of that from the old days, right? They still got cellars full of that stuff here in Slovenia, and they smoke that cigar and they go, they're aparachnik here, right? They're all so dumb, our people out there, right? So they think we're dumb. That's the reality. And the reason that reality is there is because it comes back from the Industrial Revolution time. At the time, it was England where that started, and England was able to build a global imperial empire, basically, based on their ability to apply this new technology in the Industrial Revolution. Then we had a really, really smart guy called, what's his name? He did these process thing, like to kill the world. His name was Taylor, right? And they call it Taylorism. And it got us into the mass production. Mass production means we got to standardize everything down. And with that standard, we produce multitudes of that so that everybody can have a piece of it. Now in nature, when we go back to nature, nature embraces Vielfalt, whatever that is in English, diversity. Okay? And diversity for 4.6 billion years works really, really well. And alone in this room, we've got a tremendous amount of diversity in regards to backgrounds and where you come from, what you believe in, what you've learned, the love experiences you've had in your lives, which have been multifold, hopefully very positive, good ones. But we learn the most from where it doesn't work, And this reality translates itself into all of the command and control systems, and I was the expert. I grew up as a system engineer. I learned how to program the biggest computer that mankind ever built, the IBM mainframe computer. And the operating system with 3 million lines of code is the biggest piece of software that we ever wrote. And actually, it will be the biggest piece of software ever written because we don't do that anymore. All we do now is small apps, okay? And that's a very complex system. So I'm a systems person. Well, what happens in a command and control system, they execute all of the organizational setup based on those first 3 numbers from a while ago. Growth, profit, shareholder value. It all gets translated into things called organizational structure. First, they call it vision and strategy, right? And mission statements. But they all serve those 3 pieces, right? So the mission statement has to follow those first 3 rules. That's what the system does. Then the strategies and the mission statements follow. Then Germans would say, Struktur folgt Strategie. Structure always follows strategy. So they have to set up a structure that follows that strategy, that follows those numbers. And after structure, you have process. I love the process people. They're processing us to death all around the world today. So we got process, and after process, you have what's called systems and tools and applications. That's the SAP, Microsoft, Oracle part of the planet that's contributing to the death of this world, okay? And they're all becoming billionaires. Now, I have met Bill Gates before, and he did convert to the good side, so bless him and the foundation. But he should have went back and fixed Microsoft to stop doing what it's doing to the planet. It's reducing us all down to a number. And we humans, are not numbers. We're much more valuable than that, okay? That's the reality of the system, and it happens in every single country, in every single company, from the smallest size to the biggest size. If you're small enough and can get around that, you're fine, until somebody comes like a bank and talks to you about money. And the worst criminals are the banks, okay? The politicians are bad enough. But don't ever ask a bank for money, because the last thing they're going to give you is money. And every time I go to a bank in Germany and I sign something with the pen has a chain on it, right? Because they don't trust me, because I might take that pen, but they want me to trust all my money into their bank. So that's a one-way trust thing. And then they look at me like, why do I not get that? So. Maybe I'm dumb, I don't know. But anyway, so my next life I come back and fix the banks. Now Eunice has done a great job on that from India, and that's a great way to go about things. But this reality is stifling creativity. It's stifling human potential. It's stifling companies to achieve what they could achieve. It's stifling countries. Slovenia is in trouble because for some dumb reason, you thought doing it the way the others do it is the right path to go. It is about as wrong as you can get. You have the opportunity and had the opportunity and still have the opportunity to leap beyond what everyone else has done in Italy, in Hungary, in Austria, anywhere else that you would look at, which are your close neighbors, and Croatia. Croatia is thinking the EU is a great thing and all excited, and you're going, stupid. But it's okay. Any Croatians in the room? Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Don't beat me up for that. It's okay, You're just going to get into trouble with this EU thing. But anyway, that's the reality. Do you guys get a feel for that? Is it kind of resonating with you a little bit? Do you see that sometimes in Slovenia and other places? And I want to spend some time on the reality. So can I go push to the next word? You guys, okay, I'm going to go push to the next word here. Okay. I got to make sure I stay in my time, because there's the next word. The future. Okay, now it would be kind of really sad if that reality was going to stay like that forever. That would be kind of the saddest thing ever, right? Now the good news is a lot of people in a lot of places already do the good things that define what the future is about. We've had plenty today. I love the Italian-Slovenian combination, She got the energy going and the body movement, which most Slovenians don't do like that, right? But, it was kind of a nice combination. And what I'm saying is, that's the interesting element. A lot of these things, the reality of what it takes for the future already exists. It's everywhere. Every single person in the world, in themselves, holds the potential for the future. The younger you are, the more you believe it. Picasso once said, we're all born artists, but we grow out of it. We get trained out of it. We lose connection to the humanness that makes us so special. So the future is already here. The only question is, how do we activate it? How can we make it happen in a way that sustains itself forever? And that's the future model. The future model basically means that the center point is no longer growth, profit, and shareholder value. The center point is no longer numbers based on control. The future is people as the center point and the values that connect to the people. And instead of control, it's all about trust. Question came up today about trust going up and not trust coming down. Most senior executives don't even know how to answer that question because they can't contemplate ever trusting anybody outside of themselves because they can't, most of them, which is a shame. Right? And a test we do for that on the CEO level is something we call the 11-second hug, right? So you go out to your CEOs and you get when you're alone in a room, don't do this in front of others, okay? I do this when I'm alone with the CEO, and I give them a hug, and they hold on to that hug for 11 seconds and don't let go. And they might try to get out of the hug, right? And it's kind of interesting when I talk to people about it, because I do the 11-second hug, and I do, 300 push-ups a day, so I can hold on to just about anybody. I don't let go, and then I leave the room. And then there's the contemplation of what happens after Patrick leaves the room after hugging the CEO for 11 seconds, right? Now in America, we say a hug is nothing else except saying, I love you without using words. That's what a hug is. So men must do the buddy hug, which is they do the hand and they do the shoulder thing, because you don't want to get too lovey, right, in front of other people. But so what do you guys think happens in that room? What happens afterwards? Their shock is like an automatic given. Some of them immediately call security. I had this guy in my room, they call security, the guy hugged me. And I'm not sure because I don't go in the room and see it all the time, but I've got some ladies in my team that are very intuitive and have a good feel for this, and they've tried it out. They think 40% of them cry, because they can't remember the last time someone gave them a hug. Okay? Now that might be different in Slovenia. Your president and your politicians and your senior people get hugs all the time, probably feel good about themselves. I don't know, right? But the future basically means that when people and values and trust and dignity and all those things become the center point, all of a sudden the rest will follow. If you're going to do if you bind your people in that deeply and that closely, things start to change. Now you see this in sports teams all the time. The most successful sports teams you've ever seen, do you think they have a high level of trust and respect for one another? Yes, they do, okay? If you ever go to teams like your team that's very, very successful, you'll see certain characteristics that they always have. They share things like respect and trust. They're very open with one another. They don't hesitate when someone makes a mistake to say so. So there's a lot of openness in the teams. There's a strong level of belief in each other. In their leadership, there's a big common purpose that they identify with as a company. So these characteristics, when you start writing them down, they're very, very similar in any team you've ever seen that's been successful. Be it in sports, be it in business, even a political team, if there ever was a successful political team, they would have those types of elements. I've never seen an honest politician, so hopefully there's no one in the room here today. But, that's something we spent a lot of time looking at in the last 6 years, finding out what are the common sets and aspects of the elements for the future model that activate that potential, that really get it going. And the interesting thing is, as we looked at it, we saw that it was applicable in every single culture we looked at, be it in Japan, in Vietnam, in India, in America, in Slovenia. Everywhere we went, dignity and respect was fundamental. You might define it differently, yes. A young lady with 6 children in Bangladesh may have a different definition of respect as a term than an elderly gentleman in Tokyo. Of course. But the base fundamental requirements for us as human beings to feel needed and to be in an environment where we feel good, have an atmosphere of trust, where we can be creative and make mistakes at the same time, that's something that we really, really like to have, but we've so rarely encountered it. And some people say, well, Patrick, because that reality is so bad, we'll never make the future happen because so few people have it. And I said, well, if you've ever met somebody that's never encountered love in their life, they probably want it more than those of us that have had it, that have been nurtured our lives from our parents, families, and others. So what I'm saying is, for this future, it doesn't matter whether you already have it because you're living it with your team, or you're in an environment where you've never seen it. Your willingness to want it, to keep it, and to have it because you've never had it are at such a high level that if we activated that potential in every single group, in every single organization, in every single company in Slovenia, 2.4 million people would lead the world to a place that's new and different. Would you not? You would have that potential. And I believe in that big time. And we spent all our time the last 6 years figuring out how to do that. So my last word, which I only have about a minute to do now, so I apologize, we'll have to do it very quickly, is, so are you guys okay on that future? Does that feel like an okay, good future? You like that? And some of you already have elements, big parts of it, right? But if you look in other parts of your company, you got the Excel sheet, super schnookies, and they just Excel you to death, right? And think that's good. I once had a discussion with the CFO of Dell on that. because he'd spent 4 hours with me, and he was screaming at my Excel sheet. It really got violent. And he was from Texas, right? And it was a $60 billion company. I only had $1 billion of the business, but he was putting all kinds of energy into using really bad words with my Excel sheet. And I looked over at him at some point, and I said, you know what? I'm kind of tired of this thing, right? Because my Excel sheet can't hear you, to be honest, because Microsoft did not build ears onto the program. So my Excel sheet can't hear you. And secondly, no matter how much you scream at it, nothing's going to change. I said, you take that energy with me to visit some of my customers back in Germany, I guarantee you something would change. Now, it may go down because you're being an asshole in front of my customer, so maybe I won't take you with me. But guess what? Stop believing that just because an Excel sheet says something that it has anything to do with reality, because there's not a single Excel sheet in the world that has any clue whatsoever of what reality is in our businesses. But we have leaders that have reduced themselves to doing nothing else except that. With great exceptions that we heard today, that always go through the store, go see their people, talk to their people, right? But 99% of the Global 500, if it's in the Excel sheet, it's reality. What they don't realize is those Excel sheets get manipulated to where they want it to be all the time. It's called watermelon dashboards. You guys grow watermelons in Slovenia? Outside, they're green, and inside, they're red. Right? So what it means is that dashboard is always showing green, even though the reality is red. In Germany, there's a Berlin airport that will probably never be built. We're going to lose $6 billion because of that. They were telling everybody it was fine. But if you would have walked once through the construction workers, every single one of them knew it wasn't going to work. But no one ever took the time to go ask these guys, right? So the path is probably the most important question. And the good news for you guys is, maybe not good news, but the bad news might be, I'm not going to tell you the path today because I really do want to come back to Slovenia and help you along the path, right? So the path basically starts with the most fundamental element of what humanity has always been about. And we've forgotten it. It starts with belief. You got to believe that that's a future worth fighting for. And once you do, and once you care, that's the second piece. Once you care more about the people around you than even for yourself, the minute we care enough, we're willing to sacrifice. Sacrifice means we would do anything for the others, including giving our life. And all the politicians and the managers in the world would have to do is look at the one job description on the planet that in the 79 countries where they do the survey is always the most highly respected job in the world. The bottom one, usually they stack rank about 20 different jobs. The bottom one happens most of the time to be politicians for some reason. I don't know why. And then the managers are pretty down there too. But that changes. So the bottom and the middle, in some countries, the religious people, spiritual people are at high. In some countries, they're grouped with the politicians for some reason, right? But the one thing that's in common in all 79 countries around the world is the number one most respected job on the planet. What do you think that is? Close. Teachers are up there, but different by country. Doctors. Doctors are sometimes up there, depending on the country, and in some countries they're down low. She got it. The most respected job in every country where it's ever been surveyed in the world is the fireman. Because the fireman will, at the risk of his own life or her own life, go save strangers they've never met before. If there's a drug house on fire, they will go in there and save the drug dealers. They have no moral element. They say the human value of life is as high for a baby infant in a fire as an old person. As much for a spiritual leader as for a drunken bum. They don't differentiate that. And that's the future. If we can believe and if we can care so much that we're willing to sacrifice for one another, take pain for one another, we will no longer ever have to ask the question about integrity and moral obligations or anything, because that is part of caring for one another and sacrificing to achieve the future state, right? And I'm going to have to stop because my time is up. But what I wanted to wrap up at the end was that if that's the reality that we live in every day and we breathe it, and if that's the future we would really like to have, then we just have to start doing something about it in every single minute of every single day. And if enough of us would stand up to do so, no one would have a chance. It has happened before, the revolutions that have changed the course of human history. It's now time, not for revolution in the sense of warring factions, but for us to stand up for human dignity. And to tell those in the system in charge, it's not people that are our problem. It's not the CEOs or the politicians. It's the system. The system has no soul. The system isn't somebody we can nail on a cross and it's finished. What we have to do is stand up and say, we are the system. We are the future. And this is the only path for the future. And every single culture in every single country around the world would stand up and hold hands with Slovenia and say, you are right. And they would do this, which in some countries means yes. And when the Japanese say, I think, in Germany they go, I think. In Japan, the Japanese go, I think. Okay, and I think Slovenia, this is you. Okay, this is you. And I thank you for the poems a while ago, and you'll send me those. And I wanted to say that if there's a place on this planet where I believe in the next 5 years, let it be 10 years, that there's the potential to be the example for the rest of the world of what closeness of humanity to one another means in business and in life, it's this country. And I will do anything I can in the course of those 10 years to be here and help you find the path to the future. I love your country. Thank you very much.